Now I went ahead and created a categorization of 3 types of terrible terrain. And that first category is terribly annoying. These biomes seem harmless at first, but being in these locales for extended periods of time can take a toll on your players. And I've already kind of created one example for this category, a bug-ridden bog. The blood-sucking denizens of this locale will follow your party until they clear the tree line. Now, if you have ideas for each one of these categories of terrain, you can also go ahead and just leave a prompt right there in the chat there, and we'll go ahead and create that as well. And then once you add that, we'll go ahead and decide where that should be categorized. That next category is terribly painful. These biomes dangers are far more evident and immediate. Players should be constantly on alert in these types of locales. And I have a volcanic isle here. These moving molten terrain is constantly shifting, so your players will be constantly aware of the moving rocks and formations underfoot. Hey, first time chatter, glad that you're here. Then we're going to go over to our final category, the terribly dead category. These locations players cannot survive without magic, special armor, skills, artifacts, or other supernatural means. All right. So we'll start at the top. Don't forget, if you want to clone and edit, you totally can. Just look at the top of the chat, and you'll notice there the link so that you can kind of follow along. Now, I'll quickly kind of go over just the format because I always like to let people know how I set this up. If you look into that right panel there, there's this right layer panel, and I've kind of organized things very carefully so that way it's more easier to kind of work with this map here. So you see here, I've got a series of layers. I've got my text layer. That's these texts right here, whether it's the information or the labels here. So that way it's all in a separate layer. Those of you who might have their map just updated from the 1.0 to the 2.0 version, you'll notice that you might not be able to select your text. Go to that right panel and you'll find probably a second layer called Object Layer 2. On there is where you'll probably find your text. And we're not going with an isometric view per se. We're going to do all of this with the fantasy world style. Now, on top of my text, I've also got my terrible terrain. These are the 3 different terrains that I've made for each individual category. As you can see here, when I highlight it, I try to select it. So that way it's all on one layer and I don't accidentally select an isometric board or select text. So putting things on individual layers is a great way to organize your map. I'm also going to have an isometric boards. That's these isometric boards that I made. And these are pretty easy to make. And then finally, the guide graphics here with the categorizations and the lines and all of those things have been added to this layer. All right, so if anyone has any ideas for other terrible terrain, whether it's terribly annoying, painful, or terribly dead, feel free to add those into the chat and we'll categorize them properly. I went ahead and did one prompt already to get us started, this forest slime, and I'm going to jump over to terrible terrain category here, or the terrible terrain layer, so that I can work on that without accidentally selecting anything. So that should be easy. I'll zoom in here. So this slime forest is this sticky forest that can be a nightmare for players to traverse if they're not careful. So as you can imagine, as players are traversing through this forest, they might be getting caught in the slime. It might be sticky, or maybe it's super slippery, making it very, very difficult to traverse, but not impossible and not necessarily particularly dangerous, just annoying, right? And that annoyingness can hinder movement. It takes it longer to go through. You can pair that annoying terrain with some encounters. Just know that those enemies of that encounter might encounter the same problems that your players do. That way, it's like it doesn't really necessarily help either party because the terrain is affected by both players, or by both the players and the enemies there, or you could have them be specially categorized characters or enemies that can actually travel and traverse in the landscape, giving them the advantage against your players here. So I'll start making this slime forest here. And this we're doing with the reminder, we're going to be doing the fantasy world style, okay? Let me know if my audio is not working. If it isn't, let me know. We'll make sure that it works. All right. Now, when you start your terrain first, what I'll do is I'll add some texture to the base of it. And since we're making a slime forest, and it's fantasy, there's all kinds of fun ways that we can do it. You should never limit yourself to just a purely natural biome. What I would do is add some natural biome like a forest and then add a supernatural element to it. For instance, forests aren't made of slime, but you can have a slime forest, right? If you mix both a fantastical element with a natural biome, you get a unique and interesting biome for your world. So I first might want to choose some kind of texture as the base. And the slime forest can be any color. It could be purple, it could be green, it could be blue. I kind of like the purple idea, so we could kind of go with purple. And one of the really nice tricks that you can do with the textures is you can say, I want to choose maybe this pale rough green grass right here. Now the color here is a kind of a natural green color here, but what happens if I want to do some things to make it fantastical? Then what I could do is go over to this little tweak color button here, and I'm going to bump the contrast up. And what the contrast is going to do is you're going to notice that the artifacts are going to pop out more. So you'll notice how much darker the darker regions get, how much lighter the lighter regions do. And what that hard contrast does is it creates this sense of elevation change, right? Some areas are darker, some are lighter. So it's going to create this illusion that there's some kind of elevation, right? And what I'll also do is scale it down to make sure that I get the right scale. I want to make sure that some of the darker regions and some of the lighter regions there's enough of that area showing up on the board there. And I'll just go ahead and apply it. And you can see already what that's done, right? It's brought out the darks and it's brought out the lights, making it more interesting. The next step that we can do is we can also play with the hue to kind of get the color we want. Maybe we like this kind of purplish color right here. We can always desaturate it to give it a more not so super saturated color. We can bring the brightness up or down. And I'll go ahead and just kind of drop it a little bit. And then if you notice, I feel this carefully. Now I have this nice purple ground. I'm going to make it darker. And then that way the more stamps and textures that I add on top of that, I can make those lighter as I go up. So you're going to use contrast again. Now that I've chosen that, I want to choose either trees or whatever kind of foliage that I want to use. And then I'll maybe have like little slime kind of coming off of it. And I can use textures to do that from different styles. I can use only styles from the fantasy world style. That's up to you. Oh, the sawgrass plains, razorstone rock fields, all of these are fantastic. I love them. And we'll make sure to add them all into each category, all right? Okay, so I've added that base texture. And what I want to do first is create some form of like terrain. So I won't put the trees down quite yet. Instead, what I'll do is I'll put down cliffs or some kind of terrain first. So that way I can create this sense of depth. If I make the forest with just the trees, then it will seem kind of flat. So by throwing things in like these cliffs here and other things, you can create this sense of depth with your terrain, because that's a big problem that I see in a lot of Inkarnate maps is they can seem a little flat. So throwing in terrain like cliffs and things can help to break up that super flat feeling that you can see on your maps. So I'll go ahead and scale this down a little bit, make sure that I get the scale correctly. And I'm just going to kind of pick whichever kind of texture that I want. Maybe I want to create like a ledge here. It's like, let's go right here like this. We'll put one there like this. And then I'll take another one. We'll make it like that. And I'll also change things up as well. I'll go ahead and create that part of a cliff. Let's see here. This one looks good. That one. And then I'll create one that goes in the back. Kind of like this. There we go. That looks good. Oh, let's put another one right there like that. That looks good. So now we have that kind of space there. Why don't we also put like a kind of like a plateau rock of some kind in there just to kind of make it more interesting. Like maybe place a piece right there like that. Another one right here like that. There we go. Let's go ahead and scale this up so it fits. That looks good. And then I'll just go ahead and make sure I connect these pieces together. There we go. Got some nice terrain. There we go. That looks good. And I'm just going to go ahead and take that add mode of that mask tool real quick. And I'm going to go use a regular brush. I'm just going to go ahead and fill in that little spot right there. There we go. Okay. Now the next step is right now it still seems a little flat because I haven't used contrast to show the lower and the higher parts. So I should just take that same texture that I had, go to tweak colors, and just bring the brightness down just a little bit more. And then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and bring the size down, make sure I'm set to the right layer. And I'm just going to go ahead and paint this part a little bit darker than the others. So I'll paint this in. It's going to be a little darker. That looks better. In fact, we can make it just a teeny bit darker. There we go. And this darker section. There we go. That looks good. Okay. And then what I might also do too is I might want to consider maybe changing some of these stamps. I do like the brown. I think it does look good, but why don't we play with the hue of the stamp to come up with some unique, interesting shapes like we can have, or colors. Like I could use green. I could use like a blue color. I could bump up the saturation so I can really kind of see the color. I could go with purple, but I think a contrasting color might actually look more interesting. Like this blue here, I think looks kind of pretty. And because purple is made with red and blue, then maybe that blue color will work just fine here. So I don't really mind that. And then from there, I might want to make some higher points. Like so far, this is still flat. So why don't we maybe add in some interesting formations to give this a little bit more pop to it, to give it a little bit more height. Why don't we take like mesas if we type in terrain like this, we can go ahead and kind of just take like these mesas that we hear, and I'm going to go up a layer and just kind of place it on the top like this. And this is definitely a fantasy biome because you probably wouldn't have a mesa and a forest together, because a mesa is technically in a badland. It's more categorized as a desert than it is a forest. But thankfully, it's fantasy, and we can totally cheat that. So, and it's good to throw in interesting terrain like this to kind of break it up, make it more interesting. So I'll throw in some larger pieces there. Let's do some overlap. I've already got using that one. Let's use maybe this one right here. Looks good. We'll put that right there. And then we'll put another one right here like this. And then, of course, what I'll end up doing here is I'll go ahead and select these. And I'll do that same thing that I just did. I'll change that hue to that blue color. I'll bump up the saturation. I'll maybe bring the brightness down like this. And now you have this nice kind of terrain that pops out a little bit more. It's a little bit not quite as flat. Next step is maybe I want to create some highlights on the upper part. So why don't I go back to this color tweak and let's bring the brightness up a little bit. Let's go 93. I'll bring the opacity down just a little bit and just see how bright it is. Yeah, that's quite a bit. So let's bring the opacity down quite a bit. And on the most highest points, maybe throw in that lighter color. So on top where the light is going to hit the top of these mesas, throw in that lighter color at that top there, because that's where the light's going to be hitting the most. So let's go ahead and throw in these lighter color here like this. There we go. That'll help to pop that out more. I'll bring the opacity down. Let's just kind of choose a section to put a little bit more light in. Like this right here is a good spot to put a little bit more light. Here looks good. Here and here. There we go. Oh, I like that giant slime molds. Great idea. All right, so now that we've done that part, why don't we kind of throw in the slime part? And there's a couple ways that we could approach this. And sometimes when you're trying to accomplish something in the tool, you have to use a different style or texture, and that's fine. So if we go into the category here, I can go into something like the sci-fi battle map style here, and we'll just go ahead and open that up here. And at the very bottom, there's this Slimian Horrificus, and there's this nice infestation creep. This stuff will work great for the ground below, and I'll make sure to be careful where I put it. But I'm going to have to do some adjustments so that it looks good. Right now in its default form, it's got this red and blue, which would probably work, but I kind of want to maybe experiment with the color a little bit. First thing is I'll want to change the scale. Remember, this is from a battle map style, so you're going to expect the scale to be a lot smaller, so you'll have to end up scaling it down to make it towards a larger scale. So I'll bring that scale down. About that size looks good. I'm going to apply just a little bit of it just to see what it looks like with the red and everything. But I think I might end up liking a different color. But let's just go ahead and throw it in there to see what it looks like. You know, I don't mind the red. It doesn't look so bad. Let's go back to my history here, and I'll remove some of that infestation creep. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and just change some of the color. I do like that blue a lot. So why don't we mess around with that and try to get that bluish color? That looks more green. That looks fairly blue. Let's just saturate. Well, let's saturate it a little bit, and then I'll bring the brightness down. And I'm going to go ahead and just apply that real quick just to see what it looks like. Oh yeah, I like that. And what I'll do is I'm going to use this texture right here, right at the base of those cliffs. I'll kind of make this texture kind of creep its way off the cliff and kind of travel around a little bit like this as it kind of makes its way in. Like this is bringing over here. Let's also bring it at the base of these mesas. Not a bad place to put some of those. Right, here we go. This looks good. Okay, all right. That looks good. Let's put a little bit more right here. And what this might represent, which I think could be interesting, is that this slime has created these terrain. Like in other words, this terrain is living, right? That terrain is living. Those mesas are living. They're just calcified, hardened slime molds or whatever they might be that kind of were able to solidify. So I think that works out good. And I'll try to keep adding as much of this as possible in here. I want to add some in here. That looks good. Let's go ahead and make it in here. And I think that first step looks good, just getting that in here. And then we'll go ahead and add just a couple more things here. It might be not be a bad idea to run over to the fantasy battle map style. And there is some slime that we can use. We'll let that load up. That looks good. And the slime, again, is going to be huge, so you'll have to scale it down. But I think this will work, and then we'll go ahead and, of course, as always, we'll have to do the adjustments with the color here. Color adjustments for stamps is at the top here. We'll change the hue. That purple color, let's go with that. Let's bring that saturation up. I'm trying to get that blue. Where are we? Oh, we're getting close. That looks close. Let's bring the brightness down. That looks good. Okay. And I'll go ahead and create this slime, and I'm going to go ahead and place it carefully just right here like this. And then I can put another one kind of coming down like, ooh, let's go the other way. Let's flip this. I'll put the heavier part of the slime. So we'll flip this like this. Oh, I notice I have mask effects on too, by the way. Let's go ahead and make sure to turn those off. My mistake. If you're wondering where mask effects are, look up land brush layer, land shape mask, right click, land style, turn off that, and then your mask effects will be on or off, okay? Okay, let's go ahead and keep adding that slime on there. I think I kind of like it like that. That looks good. And another one, let's go start over here. This one might look good. Ooh, let's maybe put that one right there. And I'm just going to kind of place these. Well, I kind of like that large one, but that's quite a bit. Let's bring the scale down, put one there. Ooh, another one right there looks good. Just going to place kind of as much as I can here. Bring the scale down. That looks good. Okay, I didn't put any on this one, so let's do that. And then maybe these slimes are a way to, you can also like traverse up to the top of these. If your players want to go up to the top, maybe there's something up there, but it's sticky or difficult to climb up, but it's a way to traverse up to the top of those kind of calcified slime molds. Okay, let's go ahead and take a step back and just see how it looks. All right, now the part that I don't see is a forest part, right? So now we should add in the trees. So maybe I can throw in some weird color tree that will make it more interesting. Let me type in tree. Kind of look over all the different trees here. I kind of like this bamboo right here. This is kind of an interesting kind of shape, but we don't want it to be bamboo. So why don't we change it to a hue and kind of get that bluish color that we want? And then these can be shoots that are growing out of the slime, the creeping slime, kind of growing out of it. Let's also make it a little bit brighter so it kind of pops out. And make sure it's set to random. And then I'm just going to place these just right wherever the slime is. That's where I'm going to place these. And I think the color looks a little green, so I'll have to switch it, but we'll do that in a moment. Let's just, wherever I see that slime, creeping slime is where I'm going to be adding in these, not necessarily going to be bamboo. They're going to be our trees. Okay, so I'll place them there, all along here, looks good. Don't really care for that green color though. It kind of works okay. Yeah, gloom hands. Oh, I love that idea. Yep. Great. Some creative minds in the chat, and I really appreciate that. That's awesome. Let's keep adding some more of that creeping stuff. I'll put some there. Let's put some in this corner here. Maybe some in this corner here. That would kind of look good. There we go. And then I can go back, kind of place this where I want it. There we go. Where else did I put it? Right there, right there, right there. Looks good. There. Okay. I'm okay with the color. Actually, I think green and purple go well together, but let's just select all for now from the set, and we can kind of change the color and see which one looks the best. Sometimes you have to play around with the color that looks the most interesting. Like, I don't mind that purple color. This pink looks interesting. You can tweak with a lot of different things here. I'm not actually sure which one is the best. Let me also play with contrast a little bit. See if I can get some interesting effects with contrast here. Ooh, that's interesting. We'll play with that hue. Okay, let's do that. Also, hold on a second. Let me get the right color here. Let's do that. And then I can select just one rando one, like this one right here. I'm going to select that. And then I'm going to go select all stamps like this. And what it will do is it will select all stamps that are identical to that. And then I can go in and I can just slightly change the hue. And you'll notice when I change the hue that some of them kind of turn a different color. I can do that. Or I can change the brightness to have some be darker and some be lighter. I can change the contrast on some. So I can get some interesting effects by just choosing one and then editing it. And then I can get some variety of different types of vegetation instead of all the same kind. So I did that. So why don't I select all like this? We'll do this another one again. And maybe I'll just change the hue just a little bit. Let's go with maybe like kind of a slightly off green. Like that color. There you go. And you can come up with some really unique variation. Instead of having to go through 30 different trees, you can just manipulate things, to get different types of trees. Like I'll select this one more time. I'll select all like this. And then I can also play with width and height. So if I want, I can have some that are much taller than the others. And I don't mind it being a little blurry. I think that actually kind of gives it more of that slimy kind of feel to it. So I'll just have some of them be much taller than the others. And then I can go ahead and take another one like this one, select like all like this, and then maybe change the height. So have a shorter one. And so now you have some variations there. So you can play a lot with that. And then we can also play with shadows to get effects. Like maybe I want to select all from the set. And then I'm going to go over to shadow, go to none, go to custom object shadow. You'll notice that there's a shadow there. And what I do with this shadows is I'll go ahead and bring the blur down a little bit. And then I'll kind of just choose the color that I want. Because it's slime, why don't we just kind of be creative and kind of come up with a kind of a different color shadow that might make it a little bit more interesting. Maybe a dark kind of blue color might look good. And then what I can do is I can just change the vertical part to make it look like the shadows are underneath of it. And I can just kind of change that color to whatever I want it to be. Like maybe I like the lighter color. Maybe I want it to be a darker color. Maybe I want it to be similar to that green color. So I could just bring that down like this. If I want to color the ground, I totally can. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to. You can just bring the intensity down or turn it off. It's up to you what you think works best. But I'll just throw a little bit down on there just to kind of blend more. The ability to rotate the stamp is if you place a stamp down and you hold Control key and use your mouse scroll wheel, you'll see I'm able to rotate it. If you're not certain where to find the shortcuts, go down right here and you'll see shortcut keys and you'll see all the different shortcuts that you can see here. So there's a lot of different shortcut keys that you can kind of choose from. I think you can also select the K key. Let me see if it's correct. Yes, you can select the K key to have your shortcut keys kind of show up here, okay? All right. And I think overall this looks pretty good. The other thing that I would quickly add is some light sources or some light. I always find that adding just a little bit of light or shadow to anything makes it so much better. So I'm going to take a light source from the Fantasy Battle Map style. Doesn't really matter which one it is. You can choose the orange or the yellow one. I'll go up a layer so it's the very top. And then I'll just go ahead and kind of just manipulate this a little bit put a little bit of light here. And sometimes you can just place the light in the center here if you want to show that there's light there, or you can play around with blend modes and colors. Like we can play with stuff. Like I can change that hue to more of a deep purple color or a deep blue color. And then I can go into the blend modes. I can go to like darken, multiply, color burn, and I can kind of just see the different effects that kind of happen when you start playing around with the various blend modes to see which one kind of works best for you. Like maybe you just want to have it all be a blue color and the concentration here of this stuff, whatever you want, right? So for now, I think I'll just worry about just normal overlay, and I'll just switch the color back to the normal kind of yellowish color there. And I'll kind of just place that there so the light is kind of showing in that center piece there. In fact, I'll kind of move it a little bit this way like that. There we go. That looks okay to me. And now I have a little bit of a light source there to kind of make it pop out a little bit. So now we have this slime forest. And then once I've done with all of that, I'll go ahead and select it all. And I'm going to go create group, and I'm going to call it slime forest. The light really, really does help. I will tell you right now. So we'll go ahead and create. So now I have slime forest, and you'll notice that I have my different kind here. I'm going to go through the chat here and kind of look at the ones that people mentioned. I thought I saw a bunch of interesting things like a razor stone rock fields, which I think is great. It's not necessarily a lethal place unless you're just not careful with your surroundings. That could fit in the terribly annoying. Maybe the rocks are so sharp that even if you step on them with shoes, it could cut the shoes, so that could become terribly annoying. Maybe it becomes deadly if you land on it or fall on it, and maybe an encounter would be the way to do that. Like your players probably aren't going to fall down just walking randomly, but if they're in an encounter, they might trip, cut themselves on a rock, or whatever. So that terrain would make that a little bit more interesting by throwing in some rocks. And I don't know how DMs handle environmental damage. I've heard some people will use like a D6 for moderate damage. If you feel like the D6 is overkill, you could always use like a D4. I think that's just really up to you as the players or as the DM to kind of decide what works best. So let's go ahead and create that. Boiling spring, acid pools. Oh, I love all of these. Let's start with our razor stone. I think that sounds pretty good. A sea of dust. Oh, that sounds like that would go into the terribly painful category. Let's go ahead and create that rock terrain that someone was mentioning earlier. I think that's a good idea. And in fact, I might cheat a little bit and maybe have it, let's go ahead into back to our fantasy world here. As always, we should pick the texture that we want to be the base. We'll go back over to our fantasy world style and kind of decide which one we like best. I kind of like this turquoise ice. That looks good, but I don't care for the color. So we could maybe go for a different color. I don't want to go with purple this time. Maybe we'll just bump the color up and bump that contrast out to really, really get that blue color out. We'll desaturate just a little bit there. And then I'll go ahead and apply this to the land here. Oops, and we'll go to 100%. There we go. That looks good. All right, that looks good. And maybe we can kind of use some of this ice. So because some of these, or we could use this right here, this crystal, green crystal, like these can act as like maybe sharp, really sharp rock formations that kind of protrude out of the ground. So we could maybe use these. We'll probably have to adjust that hue to kind of get the right color we want. So I'll bump that color up, bump that contrast down, bump the brightness up, and see what I can do to kind of get it to match some of that color. Let's bump that brightness up. Let me go ahead and place a stamp down and see how it looks. Yeah, that looks about right. That looks okay. There we go. Oh, razor rocks are dragon breath glass from a previous elder dragon. Oh, I love that idea. Let's do that. That's great. Like maybe, for instance, you could say that like a dragon did their breath, right? And they kind of sprayed it like this across. And then they can have it go small and then kind of get bigger like this as it goes to kind of make it look like it was a big sweeping kind of attack like this. And then maybe they kind of moved their head and so it swept across the landscape like this. There we go. That looks good. Oh, not a bad idea. I'm fine with that. Place this here. There we go. That looks good. And in fact, we might want to even consider adding like a dragon to the terrain as well. So maybe we could use like a skeleton. And I'll use some varying sizes too. If you notice, all the crystals kind of look exactly the same size. So I'll just kind of change them up and add some smaller ones in here just to kind of break up that look. Because you would expect some varying sizes, like all the crystals wouldn't be, or razor rocks would all be the exact same size. So we'll throw in some variety, some medium-sized small ones, go even smaller than that, bring the scale down. Then you have some small ones like this. And I'll place small ones around like this as well. Like maybe some of the breath kind of fell in random spots as they are shooting this razor rock breath. I'm not sure. We'll go ahead and throw that there. That looks good. Okay, that looks about right. In fact, I'll kind of change things up a little bit. I'll go ahead and just select all just like this, and then maybe I can just change the brightness down just a little bit for some of it. It looks like a lot of them. Did the random not go off? It looks like the random didn't work very well. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and select a couple randos. Like this. There we go. That looks good. And then I'll go ahead and just bring the brightness down just a little bit, just to kind of break up. Break that up a little bit. There we go. That looks a little better. Okay. That looks right. So you have these razor rocks all along here, kind of a sharp terrain. As long as your players are careful, they probably won't get into any trouble. One thing we should do that I'm noticing is that you notice that the some of these, they don't really blend in with the texture beneath it. So why don't we use like a cracked ground texture of some kind? We could just type in cracked, and I think there is some. Now maybe we can go to fantasy battle maps for that instead. There's this cracked ground right here. And I'll just change the brush size, and I'll change the scale. Because remember, it's a battle map, so the scale is going to be small, while a fantasy world style is going to be much larger scale. So kind of keep that in mind. So I'll just bring that scale down like this, and then just right underneath, I'll go ahead and put this cracked ground texture just right underneath that. And what that should do is it should cause the stamp to blend with the terrain itself, so it doesn't just look like it's just randomly protruding out a little bit. You would expect maybe some cracked ground, some damage from the breath. So we'll go ahead and just add a little bit there, here, and to add some extra danger to the terrain, getting closer to the spikes. Maybe the terrain is kind of not solid here; it is cracked. Maybe too many bodies or too many players on that cracked ground will collapse, they'll fall down into a pit or something. That's really up to you. I think overall that looks okay. We might want to add in just a couple more things here. And the name was Razor Rocks, so let's go ahead and change that to, what was it? Razor Rock? Yeah, let's go with Razor Rocks. Yeah, what are we doing? Razor Rock Plateau? Is that what it would be, maybe? Let's try that. Let's make sure I didn't accidentally add in some curvature, which I did. We'll call it Razor Rock Plateau. I remember how to spell it correctly. There we go. And the information in here, I believe it was from a dragon. So why don't we say these razor or these sharp rock formations are formed by an ancient dragon's breath. There we go. Oopsie. All kinds of errors in there. All right. That looks good. Let's go ahead and just line that up here. There we go. Where are we at for time here? We've done 2, and we have a lot more left to do. We've got 4 more to go. I think overall that looks good so far. Let me go through the list here from a great worm. Oh, I love that. Let me go through the list here and see what other ones people had here. Let's see here. Some kind of astral spawnway bridge. Love that. Carnivorous plants. Ooh, that's a good one. That might even go into the dangerous, or it could be terribly annoying. I'm just going to go ahead and look over. We got a boiling spring, a sea of dust, acid pools with noxious gas. We'll put that in the terribly annoying category. Oh, let's see here. Oh, all right. What do we have? Gloom hands. Oh, cool. Love some of these ideas. Great stuff. Let me just scroll up and see if there's any other ideas that I missed. Switchbacks, thorny vines, extreme drops, massive cracked ice sheets. Let's see here. Boiling spring, a sea of dust. Let's go ahead and create a boiling spring. I think that sounds like a really good idea. Let's kind of go with that. It's not particularly a particularly dangerous terrain per se, but let's say that if you spend too much time by that boiling spring, maybe there's some noxious gas there, and maybe it has very little effect on you at first. But if your players linger too long in that location, it's possible that they can get terribly sick, get ill. There might be some drain to their abilities. It might come with some negative consequence, whatever it might be, but outside of just falling into it. But your players aren't probably going to accidentally fall into that boiling pit unless they're in some kind of encounter. So, and it doesn't have to be acid. It could be just hot water, or it could be sulfuric acid, or it could be something that will literally burn your skin off, whatever it might be. So I think we'll go with that. I do like the idea there. I'm going to go back to terrible terrain. And just like before, I think I'm going to use my cliffs to create this illusion of maybe like a pit of some kind. Maybe what I should do is use a crater. A crater will work perfectly for a pool. I'll use this crater, not the pits, because I want to fill in the crater with like some kind of liquid. So I could put maybe a crater there, and then these will act as the pool. So why don't I just scale them up a little bit so you can see them better? But probably at the more fantasy world scale, you'll probably have them be a little bit smaller. But I'll scale them up so we can kind of see them better just for the purpose of the stream. And I'll go with 3. I'll just bring the scale down a little bit on this one, so that way I kind of have a couple of them lying around like this. There we go. And I'll make sure that they're offset a little bit. What I want to do is have maybe some close together and then some far off. What you don't want to do is all have them equidistant from each other. Right about here, they're all equidistant from each other. That looks okay if you just make sure you don't center it perfectly, just offset a little bit. Or you can always take some smaller ones and just put them next to each other like this. But I always try to offset a little bit and not make the centerpiece, whatever that might be, a cliff, a crater, or whatever, be in the perfect center. It's just an artistic thing to offset a little bit. Don't center things perfectly. And then on top of this, I'll probably want to choose a texture that I want. If it's going to be a boiling thing, it could be rock. Maybe if what I can do, which might give it a nice fantasy setting, is that I'll have, the closer you get to these boiling pits, life begins to diminish. So the further away from the pit, I can put some grass, some trees, but then the closer and closer and closer we get to the pit, you'll notice that the grass begins to die. This will make, and the plants are dying, to let the players know, like, hey, stay around here too long, you might not survive being here, because the dead plants are getting closer to those pits. So let's pick a color. And normally what I'll do for picking a ground texture is I'll just choose brown at first, right? Whatever dirt texture that I want. And then from there, I can throw in like a grass texture. So I'll go back over to here. Let's go to Fantasy World. Let's choose kind of a diminished grass instead of a really bright green, because let's just say that because that noxious gas is there, even though the gas doesn't reach too far out, the grass shouldn't be verdant. It shouldn't be really plush and bright green. It should be more of a diminished green to kind of show the noxiousness of the grass. So I'll make sure I'm set to that land brush, and I'm just going to go ahead and paint around, but not close to it, right? Like I'll paint a little bit here, not too close to the crater, a little bit of grass here, not too close to the crater, like this. There we go. That looks good. Just like that. Okay. And then, oh yeah, bones are a great idea. And then I'll use that same cracked ground texture that I used before. And why don't I just put it right underneath these craters, because you would expect that there'd be some cracked ground, excuse me, where the craters are. So we'll add a little bit of cracked ground to kind of break that up. That looks good. Okay. And if you wanted to add a little bit more drama to your pits, I mean, the pits are kind of flat outside of the outside of just the depth of the pit or the crater. What What happens if we throw in some terrain like teeth that kind of come around, that kind of stick out around the rim of the around the crater to kind of make this interesting type terrain? Obviously very unnatural looking terrain, but it will look more interesting. So I could take things like these brown karsts right here. I'll make sure to put them up on the right layer. I'll select these, make sure they're on right layer here. I'm going to put these up layer 2, so make sure they're always above like this. And just right along the rim there, I can throw in some of these little pieces right here to kind of make it look like there's this interesting like terrain. So I can place that one there, one like that, maybe one like this, one right there like that. If you don't like how straight up it is, you can also just kind of rotate it. Like if you wanted to have it rotated like this to make it look like it's kind of created like an explosion and caused that earth to kind of go up like that, you can do it that way. Actually, I kind of like that. Let's do that. That adds a little bit more contrast too. Makes it a little bit more interesting. So let's kind of rotate these in each direction. Put that one over there. But this one can be straight because it's just right in front there. That looks fine. And then you have kind of this more interesting like kind of terrain. So I'll place one there, put one over here like this, like that. There you go. And so now our terrain is just a little bit more interesting, as you can see. Looks a little bit nicer. Why don't we also fill in these pits? Okay, now there's a number of ways that you can do the pits. You could use a shape tool, or you could use a whole different layer for that. Now, I don't want to mess up my layers right here by creating a whole other layer. That's going to kind of confuse up my layer system here. So what I'll do is I'll use a shape for this, but you can use a whole other brush layer for this if you wanted to. But for me to do that properly, I'd have to have another object layer above that so that these would be above that layer. So what I'll do instead is I'm just going to use the shape tool. So with the shape tool, I'll go ahead and just turn merge off. I don't really need that. I'll turn off stroke for now. I'm going to choose fill, and I'm going to choose a color that I want for the water. And it doesn't really matter which texture that you use. Maybe I could just use this grass right here, and then that way I can go in and change the color if need be, or I could use a lava texture of some kind. That might look interesting, like one of these lava ones, and I can change the color. If you hold down the control key and you scroll your mouse wheel, you'll be able to rotate a stamp. Just make sure the stamp is selected or you have the stamp tool being used. Just hold that control. If you press the key, you'll be able to see all the different keyboard shortcuts. The K key, okay? All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and build this. I'm just going to start by using my free draw. And what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and just draw this. And for now, I don't mind having a line, a stroke, because this is going to help me to see. When you don't have a stroke set, it'll be really difficult to see what you're drawing. So just kind of keep that in mind. I'll go to add like this. Most likely that terrain needs to go up a layer or two. And you'll notice that now I have that terrain there. I can go ahead and change the scale of it, and I can also change the hue. So if I want it to be a watercolor, I can have it be a watercolor. Maybe I want it to be a greenish color to kind of show that sulfuric kind of acid feel to it. Let's maybe change that contrast, kind of give it that more pukish kind of color. And then we can also change the blend mode to maybe darken. You want the water to be a little more see-through. So let's try that one. Let's try multiply. That one works fine. We could also try color burn. There we go. That gives that kind of a rustic, kind of yellowish kind of feel to it. Why don't we also add in a stroke? Let's choose maybe some kind of line. Let's change that line. Let's turn that shadow off. There we go. I'm going to choose some kind of color. Let's go with maybe a yellowish color. There we go. Looks good. Okay, there we go. That looks good. And then what I'll also do is I'm going to just favorite this right away. So if I go to this little star right here, save to favorites, and there it is in my favorites so that I don't accidentally lose it. And then I can select that, and then I can go ahead and do it to the next one, right? I can go in, use my piece here, and just kind of paint in my terrain, go to add. It's probably on the wrong layer. That's okay. We'll put it up a layer. Ooh, other piece right here. And in fact, to make sure that it's on the right layer, next time I select it, I'll just make sure that I'm on the right layer. So I'll go down, sublayer 1. There we go. And so these pits are kind of coming together, right? So I'll kind of just paint this in here. Oopsie, I missed a spot. My mistake. We'll undo that real quick. Go over here like this. Just make sure that you follow the contours of it. So I go place that in, and then there's that, just like I did before. Oopsie, it looks like I accidentally deleted that one. My mistake. Oops, I deleted them all. Smart move. We'll have to do it again. One moment. Yep, this could be pools of blood. It could be whatever you want it to be, right? So we'll go to add. There we go. So now we kind of have these dangerous, kind of noxious pools, as you would kind of expect. Why don't we also just maybe continue on doing a little bit more texturing? I'll bring the scale up for the cracked ground here and kind of just place that here like this, just to kind of break that up, give it a little bit more cliff feel to it. There we go. That looks good. All right. And then I'll go ahead and throw in some trees. And what I want is I want to create a transition. The furthest away from the pits, I'll have some green trees, not too vibrant green, but green enough. And then I'll throw in dead trees on top of that. And then the trees will get sparser and sparser as you closer and closer that you get to the pit. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue here. I'll go ahead and choose a stamp. Let's choose trees. And I'll start with this kind of muted, kind of yellow, this beige tree. That looks good. We'll go at about 100%. Let me just see what the size is. It's a little big. We'll go ahead and scale it down a little bit. And then I'm just going to go ahead and place this first bit of trees right here like this. There's our first part, like that. And I'll go and put a little bit of trees right here as well. A little bit of trees right here, a little bit here, and then some over here. Once those are done, then I'll go in and I'll go ahead and maybe decide to throw in some dead trees to kind of match in. So I'll bring the scale down just a little bit, and then I'll start creating these dead trees the closer that we get to these pits. So I'll throw in some dead trees there. Here, and then just throw in a couple randos, just like single rando trees just in here, just rando 1 or 2, just to show that over time the trees completely die from being in there. Let's go ahead and throw in a bunch of dead trees here. We'll throw in a little row here, and then kind of put them sparse in like this. Let me take a step back. There we go. Get a better look at it. We're getting in those sparser dead trees. And I've noticed that I want to blend a little bit more. You don't have to do multiple layers of blending anymore. You can just choose a particular brush. I find that the dirt brush is particularly helpful. You can do a lot of fun things with that. You notice that this is just a soft edge along here. But if I apply this type of brush, you'll notice that it kind of gives me these nice little artifacts along this edge here, kind of giving it a little bit more interesting kind of feel to it. Looks a little bit nicer, kind of having that little more grass like edge to it, which I think makes it a little bit more interesting. And then I'll bring the opacity down, brush size, and just kind of rando place little pieces of grass. And just like with the trees, right, I'm sparsing out those little pieces of grass to kind of show that it's dying, right? The closer that you get to those pits, the more the grass is dying. So of course I should just put little pieces of grass in these little patches kind of dying as the closer it kind of gets to those pits there. There we go. That looks good. A little bit here. Looks a little bit more nice. There we go. Just kind of randomly put them in here. There we go. That should break up that hard edge that we had. This kind of edge that we had right here, which looked totally unnatural. So we'll do this. And then on top of that, subsequently, what I'll also do is I'll use that same dirt texture that I used, which I think was this one right here. Let me just make sure which one it is. This one right here. This is the orc settlement that I used. Let's bring the scale down. And I'm going to do that same thing. You notice how I did little patches of grass? I'm going to do little patches of brown as well. Right here like this. I'm just going to put little patches of like brown like this. And what this will do is I'll create these interesting pieces of transition. Like I'll put a little bit of grass here, like this, put a little bit there, just so that it's not looking all exactly the same, right? I'm breaking up this edge to create some more interesting shapes. Let's go ahead and break this up here and break up this piece here. That looks good. And let's go ahead and put a little piece in here as well. Kind of just break this up. There we go. That looks good. Right. So you kind of get the general idea on how to do that blending. It doesn't take too long to kind of put all those pieces together there. All right, I'll go ahead and let that auto save. And then we'll go ahead and throw in the last bit of details that would make this interesting. For instance, right now, the ground looks still pretty... I think we could add in some extra texturing to kind of make the grass pop out more. Right now, it just kind of looks like a green color that's been splattered on. Why don't we also use like a grass texture that has artifacts in it? This grass texture right here should work fine. I'm just going to go ahead and bring the scale down. What this is this is a what's called an overlay. And you notice that when I place this down, it's going to have a little bit of these little grassy artifacts. And wherever those green patches are, and wherever trees are, that's where I'll just place a little bit of grass right underneath, just to kind of add a little bit of contrast. You notice how it's adding some artifacts to the grass, and it kind of blends in the trees a little bit more as well. So I'm just going to go in. I'm using a mouse to do this, by the way, not a pen, but you can totally use a pen like this. And you'll notice that that adds in these extra artifacts. And what that's meant to do is that when I didn't add in these overlay textures, it seemed like there was a lot of negative space, okay? And by adding in this overlay texture, you're kind of filling in that negative space. And by negative space, I mean no stamps. Like all right here, there's negative space, there's no stamps, but this overlay texture will break that up. It will make it look like that negative space is not quite as empty, filling it up with these artifacts to make your terrain look a little bit more interesting. Okay, so we'll throw that in there. All right. Okay. Here we go. Let me just take a look. I think we should add in some effects. Someone was talking about having like plumes of some kind coming out of it, which I think is a great idea. So let's do that. We should be able to find some smoke stamp. In fact, I kind of like this dark smoke right here. It has a little bit of a color in it. Notice how there's this like yellowish, orangish kind of color inside of it. I really like that. I think that'll be helpful. So what we can do is just change the hue of it to kind of get a more interesting color. And I could maybe use like, and what could be kind of interesting is that in its liquid form, it's this more reddish, rustic color because it's interacting with the rock in that pool. But when it comes into interaction with oxygen and the way that it evaporates, it becomes an entirely different color. And that should make it so much more interesting, right? We'll add a little bit of fun sciencey bit to it, right? It's a different color in its liquid form. It's a different color when it's more in its gaseous form. And that'll make it look more interesting, right? So I'll go up a layer and just place it right on top like this. And then I'll choose a blend mode that I feel would work the best to go with it. So I can go like darken, multiply, and just kind of find the best color that I can think of, or the best blend mode that I think that will go with it. So we got color dodge. Oh, I kind of like that. That's okay. Overlay is interesting. I don't mind that. There's soft light. We'll just kind of play through them and see which one we like. You know, I kind of like this hard light. This looks kind of good right here like that. And what I'll also do is just copy and paste. I'll bring the size up a little bit and place that there. Let's go down a layer. Let's also mess a little bit with the height so that way they don't look all exactly the same. I'll copy and paste that one and place that one there. There we go. And then when you take a step back, you can kind of see that as you get closer and closer to this, it starts to look a little bit more dangerous. And I think a couple things that we could also add to this is we could throw in a couple more artifacts to kind of make this ground a little bit more interesting. So what we could do is try to just look up like rock texture. And I don't think there is an overlay. Oh yeah, bubbles. We could do that too. I love that. Great one, Room Bear. Yeah, let's go ahead and add some rocks. I'll go to Fantasy Battle Map, or actually let me try Watercolor Cities actually. Might not be a bad idea. It'll be closer to the scale that I'm looking for, so they won't be quite as blurry. But there are these desert stones right here. Let's mess with the scale to see how big they are. Oh, they're quite big. That's okay. Let's bring the scale down like that. There we go. And then I'll go ahead and throw down some rocks. Like this, and that should kind of create some of that erosion, right? You see all this broken ground, but where's all the rubble and all the rocks, right? Where did all that go, right? Like, why is it that there's all this broken up ground, but where's all the rubble that would happen from a piece of rock that blew up, and then where's that rubble at, right? So throwing just a little bit of those little rocks right there should be able to make some sense. Like, hey, all right, there's this cracked ground. Here's the rubble from the cracked ground. That makes sense. All right. As for bubbles, totally a bunch of ways that you can kind of go about doing this. You could just use bubbles from the Fantasy Battle Map style. You could make your own with the shape tool. You could make your own with the line tool. There's a lot of different ways that you can kind of go about doing this. Now, personally, I don't think you really would need to have a whole lot because remember, the scale here would be epically tiny. But if you really wanted to have it on there, you totally could. I would just kind of use these bubbles here, and then you would do some foreshortening. Okay, now to do the foreshortening, you have to scale it up so you can see the hotbars, and then just go like that. And now you're doing some foreshortening to where that bubble no longer looks like it's top down. It looks like it's more in an isometric shape. So it's called foreshortening. So you just take that piece there and just kind of place it right on top like that. And then you'll have that foreshortening. So again, you would go over to transform, change that height, and then create that foreshortening that you wanted to do. Let's go ahead and create the scale, bring it a little bit smaller. There we go. And then you would have these kind of bubbles. Let's go ahead and place this larger one there like that. Make sure that it's behind a layer like this. There we go. And you have these kind of bubbles. There we go. Just make sure that you always do that foreshortening, because that's what's going to help to make that work a little bit better. There we go. So now we have some bubbles. All right, looks good. In fact, let's go ahead and take this down a layer so I kind of get that greenish color. I kind of like that. There we go. And now you have this nice thing. And I don't remember what we were going to call this. Noxious Bog, was it? Or, no, it was Boiling Springs. That sounds great. Okay. All right. And we'll add a little bit of information to that later because we are already at an hour mark and we've got 3 more to make. If anyone wants to come up for the blurb for that particular biome, go ahead and throw it in here. I wouldn't make it more than a sentence or two. Throw it in the chat and I'll go ahead and update that later. All right, let's keep going. All right, so we finished the terribly annoying terrain. Remember, that's the biomes that seem harmless at first, but being in these locations for extended periods of time can definitely take a toll on your players. So this next terrain category is terribly painful. These biomes are far more dangerous. The dangers of them are far more evident and immediate. Just being there immediately can put you into some level of danger, and your players should always be on alert when they're in these kind of locales and biomes. And I think people mentioned some interesting stuff in here. Oh, I do love that geyser idea. Could have gone back and add that. I'm going to go ahead and just take a look at the other ones that people mentioned here. A frozen in time. I do like the idea of a frozen terrain, and that is kind of an immediate one. It's terribly painful to be in 0 temperatures, so I think that's a great idea. Yes, it did escalate, though I will just say that you do not have to use a D20. You could use a D10 if you wanted to. I just put it in there, but I did want to show that there is jumps between the 3 categories here. But this is just for personal reference. If you want to use a D20, go for it. You could use a D10 too. It doesn't really matter. I think as a DM, that's a decision that you have to make. Now, I did like the Shattered Glass Sands. I love that sulfuric spring idea. We did do a spring already right here, these boiling springs. So let's go with maybe Shattered Glasslands. We kind of did some shattered kind of glass here. So here, terribly painful, escalated lightning riddled desert. Oh, I like that. That is actually cool. What about a desert that is so hot and it's so much static electricity that there are these dust storms that have electricity kind of coming out of it, and they're not an immediate danger to you, but if a storm comes up then you will be in a terribly painful situation. So why don't we go with that desert idea? And then the fantasy element will be the static, an immense, an unnatural amount of static electricity, because you have all that dryness. Think about Arizona, in the state of Arizona in the United States. It's so dry there in the desert. You do get these electrical storms. So why don't we do that same concept here, but we're going to ump it up to a fantastical degree, right? Where these crazy electrical storms are kind of just traveling slowly like a herd of buffalo across a plain or across the sandy desert. And they are dangerous if you get caught in them, certainly lethal and painful. So we'll go ahead and throw those in there. So now that we've kind of chosen a kind of terrain, let's go ahead and choose the right type of texture that we want to use. I did like the idea of a desert, so we could just type in sand or desert. Doesn't really matter. Let's go ahead and just use this light beige color. We can go with kind of that color for now, and let's go ahead and paint that on there like that. That looks good. And then from here, I'll probably want to choose some dunes as well. And there are different types of deserts. I do have a desert guide that you can use. There's lots of different types of deserts, but let's go with the kind of the more, what people most think of when they see of a desert as having dunes, right? There's rocky deserts. There's cold deserts that are in the more colder regions. There's all kinds of different deserts, but let's go with a generic desert, just the sandy kind, nothing special. And we'll go ahead and apply some sand dunes in here. And the way that I kind of do sand dunes is I want to create this line of continuity. Let me show you. And there's different types of dunes. There's all these different kinds. So I'm not going to go into maybe all the different kinds, but I'll show you the one that I use. But we could go over an entire stream. I think there is a deserts versus forests, and we'll go over that. And what I want to do is I want to create this illusion of like waves of dunes like this, right? Let's say there are these waves of dunes that I have like this. And what I want is I want to take my stance. Like, oh, I notice I'm on text, by the way. That's a mistake on my own, but you get the idea. What I want to do is create these lines of dunes. So let me show you how I do that. I'll go ahead and create one dune there, and I'll take another one. And then what I want to do is I kind of want to connect these to kind of create this illusion that I'm creating these kind of lines like this. So I have one there, and then I'll create another one, and maybe I'll have it be a little bit more bizarre. I'll have it go like this, go in here like this, push it this way. And then maybe I'll have some other ones like this. And then I'll go over here like this, push this one this way. One like that, maybe one over here like this. And so then now I have these kind of dunes and then kind of these wells in between. Okay. And I can also use contrast to show that the places in between these dunes is a lower kind of, it's not just like perfectly flat and straight. So I can just take this texture right here, bring the brightness down just a little bit, not too much. And I can go in, I'll bring the opacity down. Let me just see how dark it is. It is pretty dark. So let's bring the opacity down. That looks okay. That looks good. And I'm going to create this illusion of depth. So just in the center here, like this, I'll kind of create this little lower kind of like terrain here. Like this, just to kind of show this sense of height. I'll do the same thing here. I'll go in here like this. Looks good. And go in here as well. That looks good. Okay. And then I'll go ahead and just take that same texture again. And let's just bump up that brightness there. And then I'll just go ahead and bump in that brighter texture. Let's bring the opacity up a little bit. And just kind of push that in right here on this side. Like this. There we go. That looks good. I'm going to put it on this side. Or actually, I'm putting it on the wrong side here. It should be on the other side. So let me just undo that real quick. I wanted to put the shadow side differently, so I made a mistake there. We'll go back to history here, and we'll restore that. There we go. The light side is on the right side, so I'll put that lighter texture on this side like this. Just put it right up onto the dune itself. Don't be afraid, just put it right up on the dune. like this. Just keep adding that lighter color here, here, just on that right side of the dune, so that you kind of can exaggerate a little bit of the light source there. And then you'll take that darker color, and then you can just kind of paint it. Oopsie, let's maybe bring the opacity down just a little bit here. Looks a little too dark. I'm going to undo again, bring the opacity down, there we go. And I'll just go ahead and paint in the shadows from this dune, like this. There we go. Much better, there we go. Make it much more interesting. It's amazing what just a little bit of light and shadow can do to your map, right? Just a little bit of light and shadow can do a lot for you. So don't be afraid to just go in there and do that. And it's not as hard as you think. It's as simple as just taking one texture, that base texture of your terrain, and creating a lighter and darker variance. And in that way you have variation in your stamps there. So kind of helpful to kind of do that. Okay, I think that looks okay for now. Let's go ahead actually and just put a little bit, I'm wondering if I should just put a little bit more into this center part right here like this, just a little bit, just to kind of give it a little bit more interesting kind of feel to it. In fact, what I'll do is, since the shadow side is on this side, I'll put a shadow right here like this to make it look like it's a little bit of a ridge. Same thing here, I'll put a little bit of shadow here to look like it's a ridge. You're kind of seeing the point now. I'm kind of creating this little ridge like this. That looks good. There we go. I'll put just a little bit along here too, just to kind of create this illusion of like a ridge. There we go. That looks good. Same thing here. I'll put a little bit along this edge here to kind of create this sense of a ridge. There we go. That looks good. Same thing here. There we go. Okay. I think overall that looks pretty good. Let's just take a step back and look at it. Yep, that looks good to me. Okay, that looks good. And just to have a little bit of fun with it, why don't we also select all the dunes, and we're going to really just exaggerate the height of these dunes so that we can really get a more dramatic landscape. So I'll go ahead and kind of pump these up a little bit. I'll go ahead and remove them, move them to the side here so they're not overlapping too much. And now we've got a little bit more height to our dune, making them a little bit more interesting in my mind. Okay. And then from here, what we want to do is we want to create some kind of dust storm, right? And we're going to use static electricity as well. So maybe your players will travel along this trench right here. Okay, they're trying to avoid the storm. So we'll go ahead and type in cloud. Now, I'm not a fan of a lot of the clouds that are in the fantasy world style. They have this more natural looking one that has like the blur, a little bit softer edges. You have a little bit more of the cartoony ones, but inside the watercolor battle map style, there are these nice kind of brownish colored clouds that already kind of, I think, go well with like a dust like color. So I'll just kind of bring them up a layer. I'll bump up that saturation to really get that color, maybe bump up this a little bit. And then I'll just bring the opacity down a little bit because I'm going to stack these. And what I'll do is I'll just take a bunch of these like this. Let's make sure we've got the opacity down. And I'm just going to kind of stack them like this. And we'll kind of create this storm. Oopsie, wrong. I need to make sure that they're up a layer. My mistake. There we go. Layer 3. That looks good. There we go. And I can just go ahead and create these kind of like storms like this. So there are those clouds. And the more that you stack them, the less transparent that they'll become. Okay. So we'll say that there are these kind of like dust right here. And then one of them will have like static electricity. So there's a couple things that we could use. Okay, I think we can go into fantasy battle maps. You know, you can make your own lightning with the line tool, but if you don't want to do that, you can use electric. You type in electric, you'll see these electrical surges, which I think works just fine. You could use these. The only thing I would do is maybe change that blend mode. Change the blend mode to another blend mode that's going to work better. Color burn. Ooh, I like that. That's interesting. Light. Score. Ooh, I kind of like that. It's kind of an interesting kind of color to it. Let's maybe play around a little bit more with the blend modes and see which one I think would work the best. You know, overlay kind of like I think looks the best. And we could change the hue. I kind of feel like purple and yellow work, but blue and yellow also work well together. So we can maybe kind of go with that color there like that. And then what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and place a bunch of them. Let me make sure I got the right blend mode here. It should be set to overlay. Here we go. This one right here. That looks good. Oops. Overlay. And I'll go ahead and just kind of place a bunch of these in here. So maybe I'll place one here like this, one like that, like this, here, and then maybe put like a whole bunch in the center. I'll just go ahead and just place a whole bunch like this. Go up a layer like this. There we go. And that way we can kind of get a whole bunch of them in here. And you kind of have this electrical storm. And the other thing you can do too is that you want to like show that those clouds right there are, there's a sense of height. Like you don't know how high up those clouds are. You can always just use a dark texture of some kind. Like maybe you want to bump the brightness down on one of these textures. You could do that. Or you could just take a cloud like this, go copy, paste that cloud, and then simply just bring the brightness all the way to 0. Take that down a layer, and then just place it down just like this. And then you might want to change that blend mode to maybe like multiply or darken. Really depends. Make sure that it's there. And I'll go ahead and bring the opacity down. And then you can create this sense of the shadow of the cloud by simply placing the stamp underneath of it. That will kind of create this sense of a shadow. Let me copy paste that. There we go. Put another one right underneath here. Let me make sure I got the right layer. Let's see here. One can go there like that. Let's bring the opacity down. Just you want to create a sense of depth there by creating some shadow underneath. Hey, Sesame, glad that you're here. All right, let me just take a step back. Yeah, I do like the electricity. I'll probably put a little bit more, maybe another one. Oopsie. Let's put another one in here. Oops. Should be set to overlay. There we go. I'll just put a whole bunch of them inside of this center here like this. And then I'll have a bunch kind of coming out. Like that. There we go. And then also behind the layer as well. So that way there's some underneath that you can kind of see. There we go. And then what we should also do is we should also throw a little bit of lighting in there, right? So why don't we take a light, let's go ahead and choose a light source. In fact, I think there might be one in the here, right here. Perfect. Let's go use this one right here. I'll place that. We'll change that hue. We'll kind of try to look for that purple color. There we go. We'll bring the opacity down. And I'll go ahead and take that light and I'll just go ahead and place it just so you can see the color of the lightning or static electricity kind of glowing off the top of the dunes there. I'll go ahead and just put a little bit of this light source just right on top of there like this, just to kind of create this illusion that you can see the light from the static electricity. Remember, light and shadows can play a huge role, so definitely add them in there when you can. Go ahead and create another one, place it like right there. That looks good. Yeah, purple. I think the purple and the yellow do look really, really good together. I really like that. There we go. So we add a little bit of light, a little bit of color. This little pop of color will really help to kind of give it a little bit more of a sense of. There you go. That looks better. Okay, and I'm not a terrible fan of how empty this region is right here. So I might want to consider just like maybe changing things up a little bit. I think an alpha texture or an alpha overlay texture might look good. Like these white water waves right here. What happens if we turn those into squiggly marks in the dunes? Let's try this. Let's end up tweaking the colors, bringing the brightness all the way down. Let's change that scale a little bit like that. And then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and just kind of paint in this little bit of those water effects. And that should help to kind of create the sense of like sand in those negative spaces, because that negative space was so empty and it was really bugging me. But now that we've added in those little waves they're not ripples in the water, they're more like ripples in the sand, right? Creating this sense of a wave-like effect. And I'm not sure what people wanted to call this one. Wasn't this like a static electricity desert or, not sure, some kind of desert of some kind. We'll have to come up with a fun idea. Static desert, I think. okay. If people have better ideas, let me know. I am not wedded to these things, so it's okay if you want to change it. And I think I put all of those things, unfortunately, on the wrong layer. Check this out, super cool. I can just select all of that, go to the hamburger menu, move to layer, and just go terrible terrain. And then when I go to terrible terrain, there it is. So if you accidentally put it on the wrong layer, you don't have to copy and paste it and move it. Simply just right click, move lightning sands. Love that. I'll change that. Let's go ahead and select all this, create group. I'm gonna call it lightning sands. Love it. I'll go ahead and just copy that and paste as well. So that way I can kind of go back to text, select that, and put that in there. So if you accidentally end up putting something on the wrong layer, don't worry about it. Just select it, all of it, and then just move to the layer. And that way you'll have it a little bit easier. All right, so we'll let this save. We're at 16. We got 2 more to make. So let's get hopping here. Let's go ahead and take a look at the chat here. Love the glass storms. That sounds utterly terrifying. And what would you do? A glass storm. Oh, that's so scary. A shiny mirror terrain that reflects heat. Oh, that sounds terrible. Love that. Caustic roiling pools of murk befoul the air. Ooh, thanks. This is a great little... I'll make sure to write that down. Put that in there. Let me just go through the chat here. If you have other ideas, if I missed one, if you mentioned something and it didn't get mentioned, don't worry. Let me know. Throw that in the chat. I'm just going to scroll through the chat and kind of look for the other ones that people want here. Love the boiling blood. You know, I do like the idea of like a blood biome. That sounds kind of cool. But I would have to think about what would make it terribly painful about it. Maybe there's like, maybe there are these massive like leeches or something, or these big leeches that kind of travel in the blood. The blood could be boiling, so if you fall into it, it could scald you. We could throw in both. Maybe there's some medium-sized leeches as well, or mosquitoes, all of those things. So I like all of that idea, so let's kind of go with that. And what I'll do here is to make it more interesting is I could probably use a lava texture for blood, because there's this really nice dark red lava here. I think this right here looks a little too warm. We could use this dark red lava here. Let's try that. Yeah, disease, all that stuff works. Oopsie, let's go with the right opacity there. Yeah, that blood color looks about right, so that looks good. So there's the right color that I'm looking for. And then the next step that I want to do is I don't just want it to be flat, right? I want to contrast with some kind of terrain. So what I could possibly do is maybe throw in like cliffs, or I could use that crater thing again. What we could do is just go back to Fantasy World and type in terrain and maybe use some terrain that we haven't used yet, because I don't want to use the same things over and over again. I want to make sure that we have some unique biomes for this. So let's kind of just look over what we have. I do like these yellow crystals. Like we could have like these blood crystals. I think that would be kind of cool. I like that idea. So let's maybe just mess around with this. I'll bump that saturation as far as I can get it. I'm also going to bump the contrast up. This is going to be important because red is a very difficult color to achieve. But when you really bump that contrast up and then bring the brightness down, you can really find that right red color. So I'll also bring the brightness down like this. There you go. I'll also maybe mess with the contrast a little bit more and try to get that yellowish kind of color that I want. There we go. Let me just make sure I got that color right. That looks good. I think overall that looks good. And what I'll do is I'll create a series of paths, or I could create a series of pools that are, maybe these crystals are kind of like popping out of these blood pools. That might be interesting. We could try all of the above. So let's maybe just throw in a couple of these crystals. Am I on the text layer? I am indeed. There we go. I'm on terrible terrain. And I'm just going to go ahead and place like a conglomeration of these. And what I could do is make some interesting shapes, like maybe have it kind of create like this interesting kind of like waves or tentacles that could make it a little bit more interesting, right? So I'm creating some interesting shapes here like this. And what I want is just to make the terrain more interesting. And of course, as always, scale down a little bit more, have it be a little bit smaller. So now I got some smaller variations in here. That looks good. Keep rolling in the suggestions. I don't mind. And then just one bit, we'll do it. Now we've done big medium, and small. So we'll put some very small ones down at the bottom here. Remember, nature kind of likes the variety thing. So if you throw in various sizes of your terrain, it's going to look a lot more believable. So I'm just going to throw in these smaller ones. That looks good. There we go. That looks good. Maggot Mile. That sounds terrifying. Love it. I could write that name down. Maggot Mile. Or the Blood Fields. Blood Crystal flats, whatever, right? Let's go ahead and select just one from this style. And let's go ahead and add a little bit more height to it. So we'll pump up this so we can get some extra height. There we go. That looks good. And now our terrain looks a little bit more interesting. Now let's go ahead and maybe throw in a different color. This little red color right here. I like that color. Why don't we maybe take that red color and then maybe put it in the negative space so that pops out a little bit more. So I'll bring the opacity down. And I'm just going to, in the open spaces, just put a little bit of that brighter reddish color. There we go. And I do this with a lot of terrain stuff. If you have negative space and you put a lighter color in the negative space, what that's going to do is it's going to cause a contrast, right? That light red against that dark red, and that contrast is your friend. So I could take that same red color that I had before and then just bring the brightness down just a little bit like that, and then I can maybe choose where the shadow side is. It looks like to me that there is no shadow side when I look at the crystals. So what I can do is just decide which side I want to have the darker side. So I'll just kind of throw in this darker kind of color here. Let me see if I can put it in here. Land brush. There we go. Bring in that lighter color and just kind of place it on one side where the shadow is. And I'll just kind of create this darker side like this over here too. This darker color. Same thing here, darker. Same thing here, a little bit darker. There we go. There you go. So now you have a little bit of this kind of darker side and a lighter side. That's going to cause a little bit more contrast. And the other thing we might want to do is we could choose a roiling water. There is this roiling water. Let me go over to show names. And I do believe there's this stormy water right here. There's this roiling water right here. And this roiling water might look good as a texture below. And so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and just change the saturation all the way to this black color. And then I'll bring the size down like this. And then all I have to do now is just apply that like this. And now I have this much more interesting, unique like terrain with all the little lines in it. And it kind of gives it that weird, goofy, kind of creepy looking terrain, right? And all we did was just this nice overlay texture. Now that really looks like the terrain is not perfectly flat. And if you want, you can go in and you can even paint in certain sections of the terrain to show that there is some height there. So if we go back to my soft brush right here, take that color and I can just paint in these little sections right here. Like I can paint this section in right here to create this sense of a little hill or a dark part of it right here. I can put a little darker part there. Let's bring the opacity all the way up. Maybe this part right here could be a little darker in here. Let's also maybe paint this in a little bit darker. And I'm using the line work from the terrain to create these darker segments, right? So if I want, I can create a little dark spot in there. Yeah, this coagulated like cliffs. Ooh, I love that. Coagulated cliffs, great one. And so I'm just painting in these kind of spots to make them a little bit darker. And then I can use that same concept. I can create highlights, right? Like maybe I want to paint just a little bit of, on some of the line work, I want to paint a little bit of these highlights to make it look like the terrain is a little bit more different. So there's some highlight there. That's a little too much. There we go, like there. Let's put one right there. That should look good. Maybe one along this ridge right here, along this ridge, this one. And again, we're just kind of creating just a little bit of highlight to make it a little bit more interesting. And now you can see that we have some darker regions and some lighter regions, and it really looks like it's popped out. And the other thing that I might want to consider doing is the crystals are still really uniform in the way that they look. So why don't I throw in blood from a different matte style, and then that will kind of make the texturing of the crystals a little less uniform because they are very, very uniform. And so to fix that, I'll just go to Inkarnate, type in blood. I don't really want these pooly ones. Instead, why don't I use this blood right here? And then what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and just place one down for right now. See what it looks like on top. Let's maybe play with that blend modes there, and maybe we can find a blend mode that works a little better. Oh, you know what? I kind of like that lighten. That looks kind of nice. Let me try another one real quick. Screen. Color dodge. No. Overlay. Ooh, you know, overlay works kind of okay to me. Let's go ahead and just put a little bit of this blood stuff a little bit on the ground here and a little bit on the crystal. And what that will do is it will kind of break up a lot of the monotony or the kind of the, I don't know, some of the similarities that the crystal kind of has. So a little bit of blood on everything should kind of help. Let me make sure I select all of those again, select all from the set and just go up a couple layers. There we go. And now you can really see the blood on the crystal itself. And that really breaks up the monotony of the crystals a little bit, which I think will make it much more nicer. Okay, let's go ahead and just select it all, create group. And I think it was Coagulated Cliffs. Love that idea. Cliffs. Oop, I probably spelled that wrong. I always spell it wrong. Oh, there we go. All right. And I'll go ahead and just copy and paste that. Create, go back to text, select this. If anyone has some lore for this, be my guest. Coagulated Cliffs are done. Go back to terrible terrain. Cool, it's been selected. Let me make sure that everything is there. Yep. Oh, it looks like I didn't, I don't think that I grouped all of these. Let me make sure that I do that. Create group, Razor Rock. I think it was Razor Rock, so let's call that there for now. Got the Plateau part, and then this one right here is the Boiling Springs, create group. All right, I think we're just making one more, I think, and that is this downright awful, you are dead like terrain. These locations players would clearly not be able to survive without some kind of magic, special armor, skills, artifacts, or other supernatural means. So without some kind of supernatural help, without a spell or something, your players would just die. If they were to walk into this, game over. Now, of course, you don't want your players to die immediately, unless you don't like them. No, don't do that. But you want to make sure that there's some means and some way in which they can enter this area. So that means you're going to want to come up with an incantation, a spell, an artifact, an NPC that can give you something that will allow them to traverse into this landscape. And also, when they do, don't make it super easy like the spell. Make the spell wear off. Make the spell have a time limit, make it get weaker the closer you get to something, or stronger, adding some form of environmental challenge, like the closer you get to this miasmic wood right here. The very air here is toxic. Only a few breaths in this stuff will send your players to an early grave, so they would need either some kind of equipment like a mask, a spell, a force field to protect them, or whatever it might be, and then add in that environmental challenge to where maybe the closer you get to the spore, the weaker the protection spell is, so your players have to try to keep a good distance. Throw in some combat that will push your players to get closer to the spore, making the challenge more difficult. Or maybe there's creatures that come out of these mushrooms and then go in to attack your players on top of that environmental challenge. Because I feel that by combining environmental challenges with encounters, makes it so much more interesting. Otherwise, it's just plain old boring serving damage instead of serving an interesting combat. All right, you want to mix both the terrain or environmental damage on top of whoever you're fighting in your encounters, your players are fighting. And I do like the idea of a black hole, and it'd be a great location for like a final boss fight of some kind. That would be kind of interesting. Like we could create this like swirling like black hole. Your players can survive there using magic, but maybe like an old Final Fantasy VII game of some kind where, you know, or Final Fantasy game where you have like you're out in space in this alternate dimension or universe. Yeah, the elemental ether, whatever it might be. And then what this place will be is like it's where the main boss of your or the main enemy of your campaign, or maybe it's a minion, one of the higher minions that your players have to fight before they get to their final boss or whatever it might be. So kind of a higher minion type of thing. So we're going to go with this space effect, right? So we should go to sci-fi battle maps where they have that, and there should be just some regular space like textures here. Let's kind of go with purple. I'm going to change that scale so that I can really see a lot of that mist, maybe even get some more stars into it. I want to make sure that fits in there. Let me go ahead and just apply that texture just to see how it looks. There you go. You can see the stars. Let's maybe bump the brightness up just a little bit because there's that black ground there. So I'll go ahead and just bump up the brightness here a little bit on this. Let's bring the brightness all the way up. See if I can do that. There we go. All right. So now I have like this kind of like space like ground right there. Step 1 is done. I like that. Next, maybe I want to create like some kind of black hole or a swirly effect. I could use these blood like pieces right here. This could work as some kind of like a rune or maybe a magic sigil or something. Maybe that's what protects you from the dangerous environment, a whirlpool. If you are going to use a summoning circle, then you're going to have to do some foreshortening. As before, you don't like that, then we could use these effects in Fantasy Regional. There's some really nice effects. Why don't we use those? And right here, you'll notice there's this nice kind of like cloud swirl. We could use that. There's this swirl right here. I kind of like both. Why don't we try one and try another one? Let's try this one right here like this. Put that there. Why don't we also just kind of bring the brightness down a little bit? There we go. In fact, why don't we bump up that saturation? Can I get any color out of it? Let me bump that contrast up. Nope, it's gray, so I can't really get any color out of it, but that's okay because I can show you how to do that. We could use the luminosity blend mode to kind of get a little bit more color out of it. Bring that brightness down like that, and now we have this kind of nice like swirling fog right here like that. That looks good. Am I on the right? I'm on terrible terrain. Good. I'm on the right layer. It's picking up the color underneath of it, which I like. So that looks good. We could throw in floating terrain. That's a great idea too, right? Let's go ahead and just type in float. And I think there should be some floating isles in there. Love that idea. Oh, not Fantasy Regional. Let's go Fantasy World. Let's go ahead and choose one that has some color to it, like this brown one right here. I'm going to choose that brown one because it has a little bit of color to it. So that means when I select it, I can now change that hue and kind of get the color, a different color that I want. So maybe I don't like that. Maybe I want to go with the purple. I can bump that contrast way up, bring that brightness down, and kind of get this like purple like thing here. And we'll go ahead and paint a different terrain on there. And what might make it more interesting is to throw in some different floating islands, like maybe one here, maybe one right there, maybe another one right here, and another one right there. That looks good. And then I can go in and kind of paint that ground a different color. Like I don't really like that texture, so I can go back to Fantasy World. Just choose whatever texture you want. This green texture works fine. Let's just go ahead and change the color on this. Get that purple color. Saturation, bring the brightness down a little bit, bump up that contrast to kind of really bring out those artifacts. And let's just see how dark this is. We can go and paint that on there. Let's go ahead and bring the brightness down just a little bit. That's a little too bright. There we go. Let's try that. A little bit darker. Oopsie. Here we go. Back to that color. Let's bring the brightness down just a little bit more. There we go. That looks good. And what I'll also do is I'll use a hard brush. And I'll use the hard brush here. Then I can go in like this and I won't accidentally get some of that faded to go off the edge here. It shouldn't up here, but down here it will because it's on that right layer. So I'll just be very careful. Go up here like this, paint that in. That looks good. Same thing here. I'll kind of just paint this in here like this. Let's go ahead and bring the size down a little bit. It's a little too big. There we go. Paint this one in here like this. There we go. That looks good. This one as well. Okay, yeah, this looks good. And then one more. And then we'll go ahead and take some more of those effects from the Fantasy Regional style. You should never limit yourself to one style, though it is hard to merge them, so you have to be careful about when you put it together. There we go. Okay, let's take a step back and look at it. Yeah, that looks great. Like that, also those pink highlights there too, kind of coming up from there. I kind of like that. Why don't we throw in like some kind of color or some kind of interesting effect underneath where the center of that swirl is. So I'll go back to Fantasy Regional and just type in effect. And we can try to just play around with things because we want to have fun with this, right? So we could take like one of these flares and then just kind of maybe put a flare underneath like that so that we can kind of have like this layer. We can put this down a layer. Let's also push this one down a layer. There you go. So you can kind of have like that underneath of it. We can change that hue if you want. So, oopsie, wrong one, my mistake. That flare, we'll change that. Oops, let's go back, redo that. Select that flare. I can change that hue if I want. I kind of like the green. I think that green and purple go really well together. So let's go with that. And then we can also just add some more effects. Like there's this sparks and embers. I like those. Why don't we change the color of that? Let's make them purple. Well, actually, let's make them green. Let's see what they look like green. There we go. That looks good. I'm going to go and set them to the light and blend mode. And I'm just going to place a bunch of these green like this. There we go. That should make it a little bit more interesting. I like that. That looks good. Okay. Looks good. We'll add more down there in a moment. Let's go ahead and add in some terrain at the top because I don't want it to be completely flat unless it's like what happens if it's like a prison dimension, right? A prison for the enemy. So why don't we put in like some kind of summoning circle or something on top to kind of represent like the prison of that space. So we could use like this red here works okay. That this island is like a prison for whatever creature or god is here. So we'll go and put that down like this. There we go. We can change that color if we feel like we want a different one. The green kind of makes sense, so it kind of fits with the overall feel to it. I might want to maybe change the width a little bit, maybe bring the scale down just a hair. Like this, there we go. And then maybe I'll create some smaller floating rocks around that circle, and then that can kind of represent like a shield or something like this. We could take this shield bubble right here and maybe put it right on top. And this will kind of represent like, I don't know, the prison of some kind. We can just kind of place that right on top like that. That looks good. So we have some kind of prison there. If you don't like that, we could just use these floating rocks. There's also lightning. We could use this stamp right here to kind of represent like energy kind of coming out of the circle like that. So all kinds of fun things that we can kind of do to make this more interesting. We could even show like some maybe there's some chaotic explosion or something that's taking place underneath like this. We could maybe create that and then we'll just change that hue a little bit. See if we can get that green effect. There we go. Get that color. There we go. That looks much more interesting. There we go. Oh, nice. Okay. Cool. Now we have that effect. That looks good. Okay, right. And the last bit of thing I think I'll do here is I'll throw in those floating rocks from the fantasy world style. I'll just type in, I should be able to type in rock. Let me just double check. Rufk. Not sure what that is. These right here. Don't forget to use the red ones so you can get that color. Or the brown ones. We'll change that hue to get that color. Bump up that contrast. Bump that brightness down. And I'm just going to take a couple of these and just kind of place them around the summoning circle. Oopsie, I need to go up a layer, it looks like. There we go. Place a couple in the center, or not the center, but around the edges here. Like this. There we go. And then also just kind of throw a couple rando ones just floating around as well, like here, there. Put them also right above the explosion, so that way you can really kind of see it. That looks good. There we go. There we go. Okay, that looks good. And then that last bit that you can kind of do is you can throw in a light source and play with that as well. So I'll go all the way up to the highest layer. Just going to put a light source right on top. I'll change the hue to kind of fit whatever color I want. Maybe I want it to be purple. Maybe I want it to be green. Where are we at for color? I think it's a greenish color. That works good. And I can go to the blend modes. Go to normal. Let's go with uh, color burn. Ooh, that's pretty creepy. I kind of like that. Ooh, that's super creepy. I like that. Let's go to light and just play with those blend modes and see if we can get some interesting effects here. You know, I kind of do like this darken or this multiply, or maybe it was color burn. I do like that color burn. Maybe I can bring the opacity down just a little bit. There we go. Cool. Yeah, I dig that. That looks cool. All right. Create group. And what was this? What? The emerger? What was the name of this one? Was it the elemental ether? We call it that. Purgatory. I like that. Ooh. Could be that. What's a whole different dimension? Yeah, it could be purgatory. It could be an elemental ether. It could be the purgatorial ether, which is not even a word. Ether. Purgatory Plain. Oh, I like that. Purgatory Plain. That's even better. We can get some things in there. There we go. And then we'll go back to our text and type in Purgatory Plain. Now, the way that I'm pursuing it is I'm kind of pursuing it as like a prison kind of dimension. But let's kind of just go back over everything that we worked on real quick, and then we'll call it good because we've been going for almost 2 hours here. But we've got a slime forest. Thank you, everyone, for whoever said, or I suggested that one. There was also Razor Rock Plateau. Loved that suggestion. Thank you. There was also this boiling spring. That was all of our terribly annoying. Remember, those are the biomes that are not immediately dangerous, but being there for extended periods of time absolutely will cause some threat to your players. The terribly painful, like the lightning sands and the coagulated cliffs, these biomes dangers are far more evident and immediate. So your players are always going to be on guard there. And then the last ones we made were the terribly dead category, meaning that if your players go here, they're going to die without assistance. So just kind of keep in mind that. And the dominant map style that we used here is Fantasy World. But as master classes go, we like to mix and match our stamps and our textures so that we can get more out of the tool. All right, well, that is good. Thank you, everyone. That was a long stream. Thanks for sticking with me for so long. I appreciate it. On Friday, we're going to be doing fantasy versus reality. And what we'll do in that stream is we'll compare the two, and then we'll talk about how to combine them to make your maps better. And we'll go over the differences between that. And I've got some guides and information that will help you guys out when deciding which one you want to lean towards. Because really, in the end, you're probably going to use a little bit of reality and fantasy when you're making your map to make them more interesting.